Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures. I'm Big Lee, and this week I wanted to discuss the global wargaming community because it is Mental Health Awareness Week. So today is actually the last day of Mental Health Awareness Week here in the UK. Something that I've had a bit of involvement with this year because I work, as many of you know, I work for a charity, so it's quite a big thing. There's a big focus on it in our field, if you like, this week. But also in other fields. I mean, my wife's a primary school teacher, for instance, so there's been a big emphasis on that, focusing schools and assemblies and class lessons and things like that. And it did get me thinking, not for the first time it has to be said, about the benefits of our hobby. Now I've discussed these many times, and I'll try and remember to put a link or something up here to some of my earlier videos. So in some respects I'm going to be covering some similar ground, but maybe with a few new thoughts. Now, one of the areas that we've focused on a lot this week is loneliness. Now, loneliness, the World Health Organization defines it as the pain we feel when our social connections do not meet our needs. And it's ironic that in this digitally connected age, it's a growing concern. And not just for those that are offline, but even those with access to the internet and with active social accounts. Unfortunately, and I've mentioned this many times before in previous videos, conversation in the social arena can often be angry, tribal, negative, downright toxic sometimes. As is often stated, people behave very, very differently online to how they would behave face to face. Now, for me, and this may be just my personal experience, but I would say the exception is Wargamers. We do seem to me to be a much nicer bunch, but I'll get back to that in a minute, so please bear with me. It has to be said that loneliness has affected most of us over the last couple of years. Indeed, it's one of the reasons why I started making these videos for my channel, was because I wanted to reconnect with on the online wargaming community in a way that that suddenly ended when the original lockdown started, and then continued and continued and continued. Many of us have had reduced social contact over the last few years, and for many people that has also meant a reduction in meaningful connections. That's made it even worse. How many of us, for instance, have hundreds of virtual strangers in our friends list on Facebook alone, for instance? Most are acquaintances at best rather than actual friends. And reduced social contact and isolation are recognised factors in harming quality of life, and in the longer term, our mental health. And again, this doesn't seem to be the case, in my experience anyway, it doesn't seem to be the case within the wargaming community. And again, I will get back to talk about the hobby in a moment. So what can we do about it? Well, first, we need to be able to talk openly about mental health and reduce its stigma. And many in our hobby have done that, and in particular I'm thinking of the likes of Henry Hyde, who's been talking quite openly about mental health issues for many years. But there are many others who have done just that. We need to reduce the stigma of it. It's something that we all have at different times in our lives. Hopefully for many of us, our mental health is good most of the time, but there are a lot of times when everybody can suffer from poor mental health, and we shouldn't be stigmatising it. It should be open and be able to talk about it with people. It's the first step to being able to resolve a problem, is being able to speak openly about it. And we need to provide safe and welcoming spaces to do just that, to support each other. And again, on the whole, my impression of the wargaming communities online is just that. All the areas where I go certainly are very supportive, friendly, open. Sadly, there are a few forums out there that are a little bit less welcoming, perhaps a little bit more caustic, perhaps is the right term of phrase, but to me they seem less relevant years go by. Maybe it's just because I'm not using them, but that's my impression. And of course, wargamers, us bunch of strange people, we've been using technology to keep in touch, particularly over the last few years. We seem to have embraced, to a certain extent, we've embraced lockdowns with gusto. I certainly did. Got a lot more done, and my hobby went into a completely different gear when the lockdowns commenced, despite still working throughout the whole period. So, we should use technology to keep in touch with people, as well as seeing people face to face. It's those lots of little interactions that are really good for people, not just those token visits once a month. And of course, check in with those people around you, keep in touch, be that person that makes contact, be proactive, support someone, your friends and family if you think they need that help. Just that friendly face can be all the difference for some people. Now, much of this relates to a very interesting conversation that I was having with my wife recently. We were discussing friendships and social lives. Now, she's a very busy teacher, very few hobbies, very few friends outside of her circle of colleagues. And not because she's an unlikable person, I very quickly hasten to add, but the nature of her work and the intensity of it is just that she's not built up those social contacts. She hasn't got a hobby like I have that makes me want to get in touch with other people. So while my social calendar is full of events and trips out and seeing friends and staying in touch and painting chat sessions and all the rest, hers is pretty much devoid of that. I have hundreds of contacts through my hobby, and I speak to many of them and consider them friends. There's some I may never meet face to face because they live on opposite sides of the planet, but they're friends nonetheless. And of course, I enjoy meeting people in person through events, big and small, in the real world as well as online. And I feel very blessed by my hobby and my wide group of friends, from such wide selection of countries and backgrounds that I would just probably never meet in the real world. So it's a real boon to me. My hobby has definitely given me something unique that my wife sadly misses out on, meaningful connections. So as I've mentioned a few times in the video today, my impression of the wargaming community is that shared connection is a commonly held truth within our hobby. We like that social interaction around the game table, but equally online. But am I only seeing the hobby through my own particular brand of rose-tinted glasses? Do you consider your wargaming friends meaningful and an important part of your hobby experience? Do you think this has helped you through a period in your shared history that for many was very, very bleak? Will your memory of the last couple of years be one of loneliness and isolation, or of a hobby renaissance, as it was for me? And as usual, my final question, am I just talking rubbish? I'd love to hear from you and tell me what you think, so please join the conversation in the comments below. So if you enjoyed today's video, found it interesting, please like, subscribe and share. And of course, if you want to keep up to date with weekly content from this channel, please tap the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, stay in contact with your friends, keep gaming, and of course, keep rolling high.